from Bonaire in the Dutch West Antilles. On an island, the lapping lullaby of reef is tranquility. The daydreaming sky is quietude. The soft sweep of pines is color. The slanting morning sun is contentment, here on a point, on a compass. Welcome to the latest floating poetry broadcast, and thank you for leaning in from somewhere on the land or the sea or maybe in the air, wherever you may be right now. I'm delighted to have you here for show 169, coming to you live from Rhode Island, near the summer singing sea. This is your poet and poetorialist, Colin Goedecke, a voice for living our days more fully, more lively, more poetically. Last week's show was the first part of a several-part series, Once Upon a Time in America. And it started with cowboys in the Old West, with some history to some mythology, with iconic figures, flavors, colors of the great Western timescape and landscape. Also films and stories, quotes, questions, and more. Well, this week it's island time. A swim through the ways, wonders, stories, and atmospheres of islands. Known to faraway, actual to fictional, colorful to delicious to curious. And the idea of islands themselves, in our psyches and in our senses, our inner senses, of being on one, or dreaming of one, or going to or leaving one. What ideas and feelings or yearnings this evokes. What the feeling of our time is like on them versus life on a mainland. Maybe you live on one right now, or you did. I certainly did, on the island of Manhattan for almost 40 years. I'm ever drawn to islands, literally and imaginatively, for many reasons, and that inspired an idea for doing a show for us all on them. So I've beach-combed all kinds of cultural commentary, quotes, anecdotes, and poetry that we can enter, enjoy, and I hope be touched by on this laid-back island time together. And for the occasion, I have put on not a grass skirt. I don't I don't have one of those. I have lots of costumes, but I don't have a grass skirt. But I did put on a bright blue, flower-filled Hawaiian shirt for our time, and strewn some shells and fishing lures and things on my table here where I'm speaking to you. So, to the islands we go. Let's start with a poem from Vieques Island off Puerto Rico. December 2000. Josefina's window. An ink-black hummingbird drinks from cups of blousy red hibiscus as warm water falls down the skin of my sleep-soft shoulders in the shower, by the sea that whites and blues between the wooden slats of Josefina's window, where another island morning begins. From Kiowa Island, South Carolina, May 1999. On the easel, a chartreuse skirt of saltgrass, hemmed by ribbons of river flowing fast and west. Beyond the outer bank, more green meadow marsh, smudged with sepia, ochre, and umber, stippled with cattails and flecked with zinc-white egrets. The half-land, half-waterscape stretches away to a hazy horizon line, a long layer of red cedar and yellow pine, then up into an island of clouds and clear egg-blue sky. On the easel. Linda Pastan, The Islands. In paradise, a breeze blows back our sheets each night and leaves us almonds on the pillow. The volcano smolders benignly, a sideshow for our benefit. We bathe our sins in waterfalls. So many flowering air plants, the breaking up of rainbows into particles of blossom. The prick on the tongue of pineapple. The shape of the serpent here transformed to woven wreaths of welcome. And all the time the surf, a kind of thorough bass, God's voice beneath the consciousness of music. Back home we call it jet lag, this compulsion of the eyes to close for good on winter. Thank you, Linda Pastan. A few quotes. This is from Agatha Christie's novel, And Then There Were None. It was spoken by the character General John Gordon MacArthur. He thought, peaceful sound, peaceful place. He thought, best of an island is once you get there, you can't go any farther. You've come to the end of things. He knew suddenly that he didn't want to leave the island. Thornton Wilder said, I would love to be the poet laureate of Coney Island. P.D. James said, every island to a child is a treasure island. I love that. And Jeanette Winterson said, islands are metaphors of the heart, no matter what poet says otherwise. It's another one from Vieques Island, Puerto Rico. Desayuno, breakfast. Behind a thick and overflowing frame of bougainvillea, blending pink, peach, yellow, and violet, we sit in view of the encircling ocean that rounds out to infinity, thinking of Italy, France, the vineyard, of other moments, but beyond all those, of this blissful one, as we breakfast on a bright blue horizon. I asked a friend the other day about their feelings about islands, and they spoke of Sanibel Island in Florida, where they've been going back almost every year for 30 years, and said to me, Sanibel is like a lover you never give up. Well, friends, how beautiful is that? Maybe you have feelings like that about an island or islands in your life, in your time, in your travels. Pablo Neruda, Night on the Island. The whole night long, I have slept with you next to the sea on the island. You were wild and gentle between pleasure and dreams, between fire and water. Perhaps very late, our dreams were united in the heights or in the depths, on high like branches moved by the same wind, down below like red roots touching each other. Perhaps your dream broke away from mine and searched for me across the darkness of the sea as before when you did not yet exist. when without noticing you, I sailed right past you, and your eyes searched for those things which now, bread, wine, love, and anger, I give you by the handful because you were the goblet that was waiting for the gifts of my life. I have slept with you the whole night long, while the dark earth turns with the living and the dead. And when I awoke suddenly in the middle of the darkness, my arm was round your waist. Neither night nor our dreams could separate us. I have slept with you, and when I awoke, your mouth, coming out of your dream, gave me the taste of the earth, of seawater, of seaweed, from the depths of your life. And I received your kiss, moistened by the dawn, as if it came to me from the sea which encircles us. Thank you, Pablo Neruda. Night on the Island. Marjorie Agosin, translated by Jacqueline Nanfito. She longed to be an island. She longed to be an island. She loved the unbridled madness of them, the islands. She longed to arrive to an island that perhaps wasn't an island. Divest herself of the ruinous, stony loves. She longed to be an island, to only inhabit the sea's waistline, and not leave or return, to only be an island, island of the night, island of the dawn, islands. Thank you, Marjorie Agosin. So it's a newer poem I'll just give you his initials, G.U. In his childhood awakening, he told me this story, and this inspired this poem. Rising from the depths. Like that ship at the bottom of Long Beach Island, far back in time, part of you, a sunken part, of your 5-year-old self, among the well-oiled and muscled Italian men striding and sunbathing so differently there, so erotically that day, being brought to the surface. A bodily arising, a surprising early awakening, signaling a life among men to come. I muse on your memory, and the contrast of your far from dark or hirsute English father, and the seeming mind-reading of your mother in calling out your mesmerized gaze, and what they revisited from that ship-bottomed day, decades later, after you came to raise and fly your true flag above life's open waters. Rising from the depths. Stuart Dybeck, Island. In the old stone hotel, we slept beneath veils of mosquito net. We were on an island, and in the dark it felt as if the island was moving. More the way we imagined an iceberg drifted than a ship, massive, like a shadow that had broken from its moorings. In the morning, we'd wake in another latitude. The sea out the window always looked the same, shifting blues one could spend a lifetime studying. From the balcony, glittering birds were visible, circling an indigo stain of current that wound like a river through the pellucid ocean. Perhaps the current was awake, still trailing phosphorescent from the night before, left by other distant islands that preceded us. And beyond the current and circling birds, the horizon marked a distance we'd cross again in the dark. Once on the island, it made no difference where we went, so long as we stayed at sea. Thank you, Stuart Dybeck. That was a new poet and poem to me and maybe to you. Rob Bresney has this to say in one of his, I guess we'll call it an e-sign, astrologyzone.com. 6 miles from Maui is a Hawaiian island that tourists never visit, Kaho'olawe. The U.S. Navy seized it in 1941 and used it as a target range for decades. After years of protests by native Hawaiians, the Navy finally stopped bombing and began a cleanup campaign. In November 2003, it formally turned control of the island over to the rightful owners. Quote, you can get a feel on Kaho'olawe of what it was like to live on Hawaii at the time of our ancestors, says native Hawaiian Daviana McGregor. We can practice our traditions there without it being a tourist attraction. It's one place we can go to be in communion with our natural life forces. And Bresny says, each of us has a personal version of kaha or lawe, a part of our psyche that has been stolen or colonized by hostile forces, to grow bold in exploring pronoia, which is the opposite of paranoia, by the way, that the universe is actually attempting to shower you with blessings, pronoia. You'll need to take back yours. To grow bold in exploring pronoia, you'll need to take back yours. How can you take back yours? Good question. And speaking of questions, let me ask you some about islands. What would you say are your memorable experiences of them? Firsthand, or maybe through reading a book or seeing a film or hearing some island music, or all of the above. Or island experiences you imagine having, or dream of having, or want to have, and maybe will have. I've had many of many kinds of my own since I was a boy, all of them indelible in different ways. Way back in time, actually, my father acquired an island in the Bahamas, in the Exumas, in the out islands. It was called Crab Cay, it's still there, that he was going to develop into a beautiful resort. Well, that never came about. That's a whole other story. But I have vivid memories of going there as a boy and in the Boston Whaler and exploring and even looking for signs from the old rumored pirate days there and maybe buried treasure. My mother loved the Virgin Islands, so we went there often growing up, and especially to St. Thomas. Well, I was thinking as I put things together about that, and that she had this dream that came true once. She was traveling solo after her divorce from my father, and she was staying at Kinneil Bay on the island of St. John. And her movie idol had always been Charlton Heston. Well, one night, when she was going into dinner, there he was, also solo, and invited her to have dinner with him. Well, how about that? It was so magical and memorable for her. I think that made, if certainly not her just her day, her maybe part of her life. Yes, islands have been sources of endless joy and poetic inspiration for me for decades, and I know for others, maybe for you. I'll always have a love for them. Those familiar, like Barbados and Bermuda and Martha's Vineyard, where I just was, seeing friends, and those I've yet to visit, like Crete and Corsica and New Zealand, and the Aeolians in Italy, an archipelago of volcanic islands off the coast of Sicily. If you've been there, I'd like to hear about your experience. I'd like to hear what that's like. And you, what feelings does even hearing about islands here conjure up? And do you have a favorite island? One you actually return to or would like to revisit? And what colors do you associate with that island? What colors, what flavors, what clothing, what music? Or just the music of nature? The personality of the people? The weather? The daily rhythms of life there, of being there, being immersed there? And how has spending time on an island altered you while you're there? In your body, your thoughts, your feelings, your way of seeing? Or given you a different and I hope welcome perspective on yourself or your life or the world? If you were on a deserted island with no sense of when you might be rescued, who else would you want to be stranded with? Or what one thing would you want to have along with you? And what one book could you read over and over? And are there stories of any islands in your country or your state or your province or region that are good stories? And on a meta level, do you ever feel like an island of being in a vast sea of living? Do a meditation on that if you like it. It's very interesting what that brings. Things to ponder, friends. Things to ponder. Okay, what can So we'll continue on from here. I should have some island rum tonight. I didn't think of that. Like some good Barbados rum. But then we might not get through the program, or we might get through it even more in a more livelier way. I thought I'd look up some unusual islands and curious islands. Some I knew about, some I did not. And this is from awesomeinventions.com. There's something intriguing and almost mystical about islands. Perhaps it's due to the fact they're often far away from our, quote, real lives. Set on their own, it takes exploration and purpose to visit these isolated places. Of course, many of us live on islands or like to vacation on them, but the islands we're talking about are the ones which are still virtually unknown. So here's a couple. There are more, but I'm just giving you a few. North Sentinel Island in India. It's the home of the Sentinelese tribe for 60,000 years. Cannot be visited, as anyone who sets foot there will be met by spears and arrows. Well, I guess I'm not going. I don't think you're going. I don't want you speared or shot through with arrows. Tashirojima, Cat Island, Japan. It's one of Japan's cat islands, boasts more feline than human inhabitants. But that. This is from Fox News, of all places, on the world's strangest islands, many of them open to the public and have historical pasts that make them truly unique. And they have more than a few, but I'll give you this one. Islas Uros, U-R-O-S, Uros. The floating islands of Lake Titicaca are one of Peru's top attractions. For generations, the Uros, an indigenous people of Peru and Bolivia, have lived around and on the lake. Their homes, tightly bundled boats, crafts, and about 120 islands are all made from the buoyant totara reeds that grow in the lake. The islands house between 3 and 10 families, depending on size, and while most Uros people have now moved to the mainland, several hundred maintain their traditional floating way of living, which began as a defense mechanism against other tribes as the islands could be moved. Wow, that was very, very interesting. I'd like to see an image of that. And from worldtravelguide.net, Forwick Holme, Scotland. The location of the sovereign state of Forwick is an unofficial island nation near the Shetlands in Scotland. The owner and sole occupant, Stuart Hill, founded it in 2008 as part of a campaign to gain independence for Shetland from the UK. The legal debates surrounding the islands are numerous. This has not stopped Hill, nicknamed Captain Calamity, after crashing a boat into the island, from using the island as a platform to encourage Shetland to declare independence. Very interesting. Well, let's go to Bermuda. This was part of a cultural contribution that I made for the 2017 America's Cup races there back then. Sea-mounted, mounted, submergently, volcanically, Atlantically, by the western edge of the Sargasso Sea, coral pink jewel in a sky blue crown, home to multicolored history, sail-clothed glory, wind-swept, sundial beauty. Sea-mounted. Here's one more. This was also from that contribution. This was a whole poetorial called Ultramarine. That's out there on my site, thepoetorialist.com, as well as the Truce Foundation of the United States of America for that America's Cup. And this was dedicated to the people of Bermuda at that time. Quofata ferunt, which means where the fates carry. Here the fates have been kind, have favored monarchs and mariners, shipbuilders and salt merchants, seeders and seaplaners, have carried this island and its islanders through an ocean of recorded and unrecorded time, salt-aired stories, still unfolding journeys. James Baxter, New Zealand. These unshaped islands on the Sawyer's Bench wait for the chisel of the mind. Green canyons to the south, immense and passive, penetrated rarely, seeded only by the deer colors shot, or else in the north, tribes of the shark and the octopus, mangroves, black hair on a boxer's hand. The founding fathers with their guns and Bibles, botanist, whaler, added bones and names to the land. To us a bridle, as if the id were a horse, the swampy towns like dreamers that struggle to wake, longing for the poet's truth and the lover's pride. Something new and old explores its own pain, hearing the rain's choir on curtains of grey moss or fingers of the Tasman pressing on breasts of hardening sand, as actors find their own solitude in mirrors, as one who has buried his dead, able at last to give with an open hand. Thank you, James Baxter. I was thinking of various islands, as you probably already are, and I was thinking of Monhegan Island. You may know that, up in Maine, mid-coast Maine. This is from visitmaine.com. The rocky square mile of land jutting out of the Gulf of Maine called Monhegan, one of the most popular island destinations in the state. And I think for good reason, having been there several times. It comes from the Algonquin word Munchegon, which roughly translates to out at sea island, first chartered by the British, and then as a trading post to conduct business with the indigenous Abenaki peoples on the mainland. And many of the residents to this day, it says, are descended from these early fishermen and traders. It's now quite an artist colony, aside from tourists that are there. And it has hosted many of the East Coast's premier artistic talent, especially landscape painters, including Robert Henry, Edward Hopper, and Rockwell Kent. So if you haven't been there and you could, I would suggest a visit. Sullivan, Maine, 1998, September. Late night on Frenchman's Bay. 3 rings of moon pool out past the lichened pine. 2 loons call each other from their loneliness. A stage set of clouds, their backs to the footlights, echo the silhouettes of wooded points and porcupine islands. Dark water, clouds and trees holding the deep night stillness. I do have several very new poems I composed just this past week up on Martha's Vineyard, but they're still in longhand, so another time. But here's one from 2015. This was on Adam Van Doren's painting Seashore from Martha's Vineyard, 2012. Cliff dwelling. Ragged and soft at the same time. The rising cliffs, the in-roving ocean, in slow motion, converging, conversing, needing nothing else but the company of the sky, clouds, sand, each other. And how many of you know Fire Island? Actually, I'm sure I know there's some listeners that I know that know it. This is from Salt Air there. Salt Air, 2. The air is infused with the essence of October, a crisp apple air taste blending with bay and sea saltiness. The reds and yellows of low trees and vines interleaving as we walk from ferry to beach, over gray, weathered wood smoothed by seasons, passing a young angel on a bicycle and houses at rest for the winter, until we shuck off our shoes and socks and feel the cool sand underfoot. See the brilliantined expanse of Atlantic, freckled white with fishing boats of every size, bobbing for the running bluefish. Watch the surfcasters lure and reel them in from shore, and the red-hatted lady and her retriever running, pole in hand, up the beach to where the swirling gulls mark the spot, as we marvel on the glories of the day. May Swenson, Fire Island. The Milky Way above, the milky waves beside. When the sand is night, the sea is galaxy. The unseparate stars mark a twining coast with phosphorescent surf in the black sky's trough. Perhaps we walk on black star ash and watch the milks of light foam forward, swish and spill, while other watchers, out walking in their white, great swerve, gather our low spark, our little way, the dark glitter in their sight. Well, as I was researching for our show, I found it there are an immense number of islands from every continent and many countries. So I decided to just find out ones here in Rhode Island itself. A long list too, but I'll just give you a handful. And I'm also now curious to know more about some of them. Aquidneck Island, Beef Island, Block Island, Chepawannoxet Island, Connecticut, Despair Island, Flower Island, Gingerbread Island, Goat Island, Gooseberry Island, the Hummocks, Lime Rock, Pancake Island, Plato Island, Potato Island, Rabbit Island, Rose Island, Sage Bed Island, Sassafras Island, Sedge Beds, Spectacle Island, Sunshine Island, Whale Rock. How about that? Okay. We'll take you to Greece, to the island of Kea, to the harbor of Corycia. This is in the Cyclades, August 2012. Mesimeri, Siesta. Sun-caked white walls, cascades of bougainvillea, scents of sweet basil, jasmine, geranium that plume as you pass through the quiet hours. Sea blue shutters closed, stillness. Even the cicadas lighter, the sleeping bodies of the islanders lighter, the passage of time slower. Mesimeri. Bermuda, July 2017. Starts with a quote from Paul Gauguin, the painter, to Paul Sérussier. How do you see these trees? They are yellow, so put in yellow. This shadow, rather blue, paint it with pure ultramarine. These red leaves, put in vermilion. So here's the poem, saturated. Fauvist, the colors, the colieurness, the saturated abstractions, expressions on the walls, the water, the stalks, fronds, flowers, the high noon, late day shadows, everywhere, shades of Matisse, brushes of Derain, Gauguin, Vlaminck, rushes of sun, wildly fresh images, wet and drying canvases. Saturated. I was thinking, too, of all the different weathers that one encounters on islands, everywhere of different kinds. Robert Krieger, Island Storm. Wind and possessions we know as safe, bottles, pots on shelves, in trouble, the marble cupids near the back door screen. We wonder where these will end, flat on their backs in the next state, hearing rain pick our crackling roof. All morning the middle of the island is the wind's pit. In the distance, pebbles, tons of sand, cold dunes move. Firs in a kind of Swedish drill stutter and vanish. Then, fathomy haze, unlit images from a faulty projector. Hour after hour we learn to tilt so well we hardly brace. Under noonpour the walls run sweat. The half-sun veiled and hurtling down, a shutter leaves like a canvas wing. What's the use to ask why the test? The house aches and creaks into the night. Drowning in quilts we flex like fish. Eyes shine like fans close and open. More of the same, cries the scratchy wireless as we turn to love, remembering on such a night we lost Atlantis. Thank you, Robert Krieger. Island Storm. Well, I have one here. Over a dark and stormy cocktail on Tucker's Point, Bermuda. It was a dark and stormy night. Rain-soaked, rum-soaked, ginger-beard, wool-sweatered, knee-socked, 895 miles out to sea, drinking in the weather. from the Aegean, on the island of Kea, the Meltemi, the Etesian winds. Maybe you've experienced them. They chap the indigo skin of the sea, flirt with women's hair and sailors' halyards, confound ferry captains, rush up and down ravines, cool the baking backs of bare mountains, refresh the faces of farmers in valleys, silent beekeepers, beachfront waiters, ruffle the ears of wild rabbits, the downy chests of roving pheasants, blow low and dry across the Aegean, fan the islands north to south, and the undraped shoulders of a plein-air poet, passing time under the sun and solitude of Kea. By the painter and poet Fairfield Porter, who I did not know was also a poet. Came across this. The Island in the Evening. At the gathered ends of rooty paths, the wharf attracts the playing children. Voices call across the water, beginning games on a summer evening. A gull who drops on another island calls down the day below the sky. As the light rises into the sky, softness comes to mossy paths. A breeze slides off the island against the faces of the children, using the withering light of the evening, reflected from the shadowless water. The games are new on the permanent water, and children under the yellow sky have no fear of the friendly evening, who feel their way on darkening paths over routes that previous children knew as the shape of the sheltering island. Shadowed forests on the island and beaches worn by tidal water keep some strangeness from the children. Under the candid giant sky, and all familiar forest paths are edged with strangeness in the evening. Yellow primroses of the evening in bushy clearings on the island, and yellow mullein besides the paths and rocky meadows with little water, focus all the covering sky in single blossoms for the children. Games invented by the children hold the light of the delicate evening before it is lost in the permanent sky, starting again the life of the island, eroded by the moving water and running feet on rocky paths. Worn paths bring home the children from tidal water on a summer evening across the island below the sky. Thank you, Fairfield Porter. Map of the New World by Derek Walcott. Archipelagos. At the end of this sentence, rain will begin. At the rain's edge, a sail. Slowly the sail will lose sight of islands. Into a mist will go the belief in harbors of an entire race. The 10 Years' War is finished. Helen's hair, a gray cloud. Troy, a white ash pit by the drizzling sea. The drizzle tightens like the strings of a harp. A man with clouded eyes picks up the rein and plucks the first line of the Odyssey. Thank you, Derek Walcott. From the island of Manhattan, which was called by the Native Americans Turtle Island. This was back in July of 2009. No man is an island, except perhaps this man, an island, an islet of consciousness, floating on an island of igneous rock, preceding civilization, on an island called Earth, or Turtle Island by the Anishinaabe, in a sea of light and dark matter that ripples out to infinity. I'm just doing a little editing, keep us in time here. William Dickey, Islands. I imagine beyond fog, a sea of islands, grave with the celebrations of the young, learning responsible voice, who naked stand, shafts of clear being, in the wind's repose. I imagine, clothed in pattern, a free land of equal gifts, where the increasing tree affords its nourishment gladly, in ripe wisdom, and is made sacred by the accepting hand. How in that place of known formalities, those accurate islands sheathed in harmonious sea, the purposes of occasion daily quicken to the center of the fruit, to the bright seed. I imagine, beyond the promiscuous water that sucks at my step, beyond the driftwood-smeared state of these tides, a community of islands where the veins pulse under the hiding skin is bared, and the body stands free of catchments in its own song, reserved, answering its attendant parts, tree, town, and shoal, clothed in their understanding. I imagine the grace given the silken young to accept their blood as an interior music of laws, as they accept the flowering tree that wills to live with decorum in those islands, in its own sureness of its relevancy. Interesting one I chose for us. I thought William Dickey, different islands. I wanted to share some books about islands that I thought you might like to know about. One is To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. And I'm just going to run through a few. The Atlas of Remote Islands, 50 islands I have never set foot on and never will. A rare and beautifully illustrated journey to 50 faraway worlds. I've actually seen some of that, and it's quite marvelous, so you might enjoy that. Books set on islands. Treasure Island, of course, Robert Louis Stevenson, great favorite in my boyhood. Anne of Green Gables. And Then There Were None. I mentioned that earlier. Agatha Christie's. There's a film by that title. It's wonderful, from the late 30s, I think. The Count of Monte Cristo. Robinson Crusoe. The Tempest by Shakespeare. The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. The Most Dangerous Game by Richard Connell. The Old Man and the Sea, Ernest Hemingway. The Mysterious Island by Jules Verne. Corelli's Mandolin. The Wide Sargasso Sea by Jean Rhys. The Odyssey by Homer. The Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula Le Guin. Our Man in Havana by Graham Greene. Great story. Gulliver's Travels, Jonathan Swift. A High Wind in Jamaica by Richard Hughes. So there's many more, but there's one. I was also thinking of songs. Now, this one must be fairly universal, I would guess. This is from musicindustryhowto.com. Island in the Sun. Harry, King of Calypso Belafonte, wrote and performed this song in the 1957 film of the same name, where he starred opposite Joan Fontaine. Over 40 artists have done covers of this track, including Belafonte himself, who performed an updated version in 2017 with new lyrics written by his son David. It captured the idyllic simplicity of everyday life in the Caribbean and was a massive hit for him. And blessings on him, off into the ether recently. Boy, he had quite a long and, I think, very fruitful life, that fellow. That singer. I also wanted to mention Desert Island Discs. It's a radio program still running on BBC Radio. You can get it over the internet. First came out in 1942, and they ask a guest each week. They call a castaway to choose 8 recordings, but not always music, a book, and a luxury item they would take if they were to be cast away on a desert island. It's very interesting. So there you are, and I just wanted to also mention some favorite films of mine set on islands. Lena Wertmüller's film, the Italian film Swept Away. Dr. No, one of the earliest James Bond films with Sean Connery. Pascali's Island with Ben Kingsley. Wonderful, wonderful story. Robinson Crusoe, the film. The Birdman of Alcatraz with Burt Lancaster. The Island of Dr. Moreau. Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island, the film, wonderful. The Life of Pi. Il Postino with Philippe Noiret playing Pablo Neruda. And there you have some, some films. I also wanted to touch on food of different islands around the globe. Here in Greece, in the Aegean. This is The Actor, the Mayor, and the Lottery Seller. Over ouzo, onion pie, cremidopita, octopus, calamari, a wavelet of yogurt with quince. 3 men from this island world, from this island earth, converse, eat, laugh, love at a simple table by the sea, by the moon, by the leave of unseen gods or graces. I looked up some iconic Caribbean dishes. This is from southernliving.com. I actually remember having on Barbados with a great rum punch a wicked good grilled flying fish sandwich. So that is actually one of the dishes, but it comes with a cuckoo, which is it's steamed and cooked with onions, lime juice, spices, and vegetables, and served on a bed of polenta-like cornmeal. But I didn't have it that way. But next time around, Trinidad and Tobago, crab and callaloo. In the Bahamas, conch fritters. In Antigua and Barbuda, fungi and pepper pot. It's in the Leeward Islands, that island. Puerto Rico, mofongo. St. Lucia, Creole bread. Very interesting. Haven't tried that. St. Kitts and Nevis, stewed saltfish with dumplings, spicy plantains, and breadfruit. And on Montserrat, goat water. Favorite local dish on this mountainous island, the Lesser Antilles chain, crowd-pleasing melange of stewed goat meat spiked with spices, vegetables, onion, tomato, and sometimes green papaya, and breadfruit. Well, how about that? What good food have you enjoyed on any island in the world or been fascinated by? Okay. How about looking out at islands from somewhere, from a mainland? This was back in Maine, and one September, the mise-en-scène at the Island View Inn. 2 lacy iron chairs touch elbows on the lawn, waiting whitely for the ladies of the 1880s with their parasols and lemonade, while pink geraniums spill from fluted urns by the warm wooden stairs to the stone and seaweed beach. A flotilla of slatted and slanting Adirondacks face the glass bay, watching for whales or wild Indians. The wide porch undulates with rockers and memories of 100 summers, and an ebb tide of crickets mingles with breaths of salted wind, in a cocktail of Maine September, where a soft woman in a wicker swing reads away through the shade. I'd like to go back to that inn if it's still there. All right, now to our last handful of island sharings and musings. Hope you've been enjoying them so far. This is Linda Pastan one more time. Leaving the island, we roll up rugs and strip the beds by rote. Summer expires, and as it has done before. The ferry is no simple pleasure boat, nor are we simply cargo, though we'll float alongside heavy trucks, their stink and roar. We'll roll up rugs and strip the beds by rote. This bit of land whose lines the glaciers wrote becomes the muse of memory once more. The ferry is no simple pleasure boat. I'll trade my swimsuit for a woolen coat. The torch of autumn has but small allure. We roll up rugs and strip the beds by rote. The absences these empty shells denote suggest the losses winter has in store. The ferry is no simple pleasure boat. The songs of summer dwindle to one note, the foghorns blast, which drowns this closing door. We rolled up rugs and stripped the beds by rote. The ferry is no simple pleasure boat. Thank you, Linda Pastan. Leaving Fire Island for Tom and Carl. A catnail moon curls in a swoon of sapphire sky that stains into a lavender wash of watercolor above the soon sleeping land. F.D. Reeve, Ragged Island. Waves pile up on the leeward rocks like winter leaves around a house and bed the island down. Skirted by wind and the soft, sweet talk of summer, watchfires set out for warmth after the sun has gone. The earth gathers the seasons back to back, then swings them round. Days that seem short turn long. The light gives and the dark takes. Ospreys rise toward the bronze-leaved clouds from the firs above the saltwater pond. Like wily Odysseus on starboard tack and young Telemachus outward bound, calling each other home, we pass through our own shadows. Our wakes rise from the sea's hollow roar. The conch shell sings our song. Next to last for now, David White, The Shapes of the World. Stooped low on the beach, gathering firewood, round, bleached, and shaped by a gracious weather, I find the eye of mythical totems, the shapes of fish and orcas' fins. My friend tends the fish, I tend the fire. Slowly the fish fries in its round black pan. Beneath, the innumerable shapes of other fish, salted by many years, burn blue and red and yellow. Our 2 kayaks are turned on a gravel beach, steel-gray light on their upturned bows, while wood smoke drifts out beyond them, smudging the islands guarding the cove. Through those small islands we coasted, skirting the wild weather chasing our sterns, and I remember that as we struck gravel, I felt the shape of things to come. It was as if I remembered how all things fit one to another, and the sound of gravel was the sound of home. And at the place where water meets land, I could meet all things. On the cold beach, we made a nest, a tent shadowed by trees, a small fire, a place to sit. The pure silence of honest work, twigs cracking in the moist air. Above us the young eagle circled, seeking a glimmer in the sea. The waves murmured on the beach, the gravel's voice rising and falling. When we find a home like this, it must be that the old ones come by, join us on the rough log seats, throw their arms round our shoulders, speak lovingly of the eagle, laugh between mouthfuls of fish, tell us to go back, tell the old stories, how the shapes of the world can speak. Thank you, David White, always from his excellent collection, Where Many Rivers Meet. Simon Roof, The Islanders. To live as they, this isle a pearl upon the shell of time, song-struck by ocean roll, washed round by years, to live as they upon this isle, this seed of a world, as simply whole. Thank you, Simon Roof. And last, until we meet again over the airways, dear listeners, this is from Tucker's Point, Bermuda, March 2013. In the pink. I walk with pink-powdered feet along the edge of aster blue water, with a soul sandpiper as company. Move softly toward a weather-cut wall of black coral, crowned with plumes of sea pines. Take in the bluffs of sun-soaked clouds, the wind-laced ocean, the finity and infinity of the moment. Thank you again so much for leaning in, thinking and feeling in. Thanks also for sharing this and other shows. Freely post a program link as you like, or the whole playlist out to friends or to your social media. I appreciate listeners like you referring others to join the Floating Poetry Broadcast Circle. And I invite you to send me your reflections from listening, or questions, or any suggestions. And also any donations you'd like to make to support these weekly broadcasts that I make to inspire and uplift you and others. If there's a theme you'd enjoy seeing a future broadcast on, send an email to me, colin@thepoetorialist.com. And what about your experience of this show on Island Time? I would like to know. I'd love to know. If you are sending a contribution, thank you very much. You can do that by Venmo to Fivefold, FIVEFOLD, at pipeline.com, or PayPal to the same email. Or a check to me at P.O. Box 1032, Westerly, Rhode Island, 02891, or donate through my site, thepoetorialist.com, by way of the Donate tab. And yes, I can be sponsored, as some know, or privately hosted as a working poet in residence in the U.S. or elsewhere to create a new flight of poetic art and dedicate it to a patron or sponsor. If that's you, email me to explore. Meanwhile, you can hear all the broadcasts online, on YouTube, on the Floating Poetry playlist, and you can follow the Poetisphere if you're not already, the oasis of regenesis I'm guiding that's coming later this summer. thepoetisphere.com. Meanwhile, I do hope you'll lean in soon again. Until then, dear listeners, here's to all the islands you've explored and enjoyed, and all those that may embrace you, may capture your fancy somewhere along your lives ahead and your days ahead. Yes, to beautiful, memorable island times of all kinds. Goodbye for now, and good spirits, and here's a bit more music, steel guitar, and all from the Aquamarines. Thanks to my friend Russell Volkman from that group out in San Francisco and Hawaii, who offered it so generously and fittingly for our show. So I'll play that, but as I set that up, and now I will say goodbye, and as always, good spirits.
This is not an illegal broadcast. I ain't make me job play real music. No pop idol, no X Factor. Under me, Kia manufacture. If music make your occupation, Bonga Festi make I and a child your salvation. The badination, vaccination, dissemination, the alienation. Fuck up selector.